Hello again, Chris Lee, Alfred Ezman here to talk some SEC baseball. We got a ton of midweeks. Not everybody playing today, but most everybody. Some interesting midweek matchups, all kinds of stuff. Of course, we got Thursday series starting. We may hit around the edges of a couple of those, but mostly we'll talk a lot about what you guys want to talk about and hit the big story of the day, which is the Texas Longhorns off to a blazing start under Coach Jim Schlossnagle, have got themselves in the mix for anything and everything that they would want to accomplish. But boy, did not get good news yesterday with Max Belyeu, Alfred.
No, it seems like, well, it's going to be evaluated week by week, but it seems like it'll be for a while, if not all of or most of this season. He will be sidelined. It's a big blow for Texas, right? We talked about it yesterday with power rankings. Kind of a little fortunate in the sense that it happened against Missouri, but also unfortunate that you have the Georgia Bulldogs right on the horizon too. You kind of want your best bat in there for that series. Tommy Farmer came in and replaced them, and that's enough to get it done against Missouri. But again, if you're going up against this Georgia lineup, that will, I feel like, get to this Texas pitching a little bit. You want offense to combat that a little, and they're not going to get it from Max Belyeu. So tough blow for Max Belyeu. I hope that gets better, because this is a guy who was putting up really better numbers in SEC play than last year when he was Big 12 Player of the Year. So yeah, tough break there, and hopefully, if there's any team that can work around it, and any coaching staff that can work around it, it's Jim Schlossnagle and his crew. So we'll see where that winds up. But unfortunate. I hope Belyeu gets better. It'll be great to see him out there again, hopefully sometime this season. But they'll be without him for a good bit.
Yeah, two things of interest. This is a very right-handed dominated lineup. He is one of the few true lefties that they use. Actually, the only true lefty they use. Adrian Rodriguez is a switch hitter, so that helps. But that hurts them matchup-wise a little bit. Now, maybe Easton Winfield or somebody gets a shot. He's a talented player, has not put up numbers this year. He struggled in the transition from UL Monroe. I don't know what is the next step in terms of replacing him. Do we know where they switch the lineup around and who they insert in the outfield yet?
Well, like I said, they went Farmer to start out, although Tommy Farmer is pretty in there every day already. They depth Winfield you brought up is probably a pretty good option for them. I would also say, as I look at their outfield, maybe guys like you could roll out. I don't know, maybe someone else out there you feel confident in playing, maybe a Casey Borba. Even though he's mostly infield. I feel like it'll just be shifting where guys normally play in the outfield. Maybe Will Gasparino, go somewhere else or something like that. But I would primarily just go either Winfield, or they'll do something creative with Tommy Farmer.
Farmer's kind of a utility guy for him, isn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and they've mostly played him in the outfield for defense anyway. So
yeah,
I'd go that route with replacing him.
Yeah, Schlossnagle loves him. I was just listening to the way that he talks about him before the season, so that's one to keep an eye on. And Winfield has not hit for them at all, but was a really good player, was a highly thought-of player in the portal. I don't know what's going on with the struggles there, if there's been an injury or something else. Now, they do have a decent number of lefties on the bench. They've got him. They got Cole Chamberlain. They have Jaquay Stewart. So all a bunch of guys that, I don't know how they shift their lineup and their defensive positioning around, but they do have some lefty options on that bench. They're just not guys that have played a ton for them. But Belyeu was last mock draft I looked at, I think he was still considered squarely in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Am I dreaming that? Okay.
I think that's right. At least preseason he was, and I would think, he was, Golden Spikes, at least somewhat Golden Spikes material this year, heading toward that direction. So yeah. I would think he's, like I said, he was doing better than what he was doing in the Big 12 when he was Big 12 Player of the Year. As crazy as that sounds, that to me is first round material. So yeah, that's also the other tough side. of this injury is having that stock maybe get a hit because of it. So I'm hoping he gets back really soon.
And sorry, repeat one more time. The prognosis for him was miss the rest of the regular season, but they hope to get him back for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, so the Austin Statesman, from what I read from them, is it seems like they're treating it as if he's out for the year, but he's going to be checked week to week. So I would think that there's maybe a chance he comes back, sooner than they think, but it'll be quite some time. I would think if there's any chance of him coming back, it'll be by Hoover or the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, it's a thumb injury, which, boy, I mean, that can really screw up a swing. You see guys get wrist and hand injuries all the time at the major league level, and the season just kind of goes sideways. So, talk of surgery. I'm reading this. I think Kendall Rogers was the guy that reported it on Twitter. Yes, it could be back for the postseason. Reading from Yahoo, let's see. Where did the injury part of this go? The fact it needs surgery brings in the real possibility this season is over.
Right.
But did they say he might get surgery or he's going to get it?
I think it's a might. From what I've seen, he might get it. Although Baseball America said it's required, so that is done for the season. But I mean, at the same time, if they're checking it week to week, that gives me the idea that there might be a chance. So I don't know. I would, if I'm a Texas fan or if I'm a college baseball fan, I would look at it as he's out for the year until something else really pops up with this.
Did they didn't say what the nature of the injury was, did they?
I've just seen something with his thumb.
Yeah. That makes me wonder if it's a ligament.
Mm-hmm.
I have a son who is a baseball player who right now is in the middle of 5 of 6 weeks out with a brace on his finger. Cannot play ball. They said, come back in week 6. We'll go. The timeline of that and this are very similar, which makes me wonder.
Right.
Because 6 weeks would get you about to the end. He didn't need surgery for his. He's just needed rest. But ligament be what I'm kind of thinking there. Because you wouldn't do surgery with a fracture. I wouldn't think.
No,
unless
that's
you're putting a pin in there.
Right. That's just wait it out until it gets better, which also stinks. So yeah. So both ways are not ideal.
They've got. He was probably their third most productive hitter per plate appearance. Mendoza's the guy that's been their best guy. Ryan Galvan just been on a heater lately too, but he was their third guy. After that, the lineup drops off a little bit to Jalen Flores and some other guys. But anyway, be interested to see how that affects. I mean, I think at this point, if you're Max Belyeu, your priority is probably keeping your first round status for next year. So I wouldn't think you'd take a lot of chances, especially if you're not 100%. You come back, you're not hitting well. That just causes your stock to drop. So anyway, let's go into midweek games if you want to, or if you got something else first, throw that at me. Sam's got a lot of thoughts on A.J. Russell, says don't be surprised if he starts tonight. That's another kid who just can't seem to get well, so we'll keep an eye on that one.
Right. And maybe not the best doctor advice either from Sam for Max Belyeu. We'll skip over those comments. Although I appreciate, Sam, the enthusiasm to get Max Belyeu out there as quickly as possible.
Sam's staying a Holiday Inn and thinks he's a doctor now.
Yeah, right.
Hey, buddy, I'm the doctor here.
Exactly. My thoughts on Texas, though, Chris, I think, I think this lineup is versatile enough if you look at the names to, bounce back from this. I mean, Will Gasparino is still going to provide the power. He's provided most of it for them, throughout the season. We mentioned Galvan and then, it's blanking on me now, Mendoza as well. Yeah. I think Schussler has been pretty solid for most of this season. That's probably one of the first other names when you hit that drop off, but we'll see. I think there's a chance that it could affect this Georgia series, but it will not affect their chances to go far, throughout the remainder of this season. So tough blow. But at the same time, I think, Jim Schlossnagle is coaching this team, so he's going to be able to get them right.
Well, and this is kind of the spot. Georgia is really not the team you want to to go face with that
Yeah.
offensive firepower. They're 3 or 4 in this league, but Georgia's absolutely one of them. Without your most talented hitter, but you do get them in Austin, where let's not forget they took 2 or 3 from a similar team in
Mhm.
LSU 2 weeks ago.
Exactly.
So, all right, what have you got next?
Midweek games, I guess. And I think the big one we talked about it before we came on that stood out to me was Western Kentucky and Vanderbilt. With Vandy, you had that sweep, or you came up on the wrong end of a sweep against Arkansas. The first step to bouncing back from that will be against Western Kentucky, and I know it's a mid-major, and I know it's a different level of baseball, but they are good. Chris, they can, if they make it to the postseason at this rate, they will be a problem for a team in a regional. They'll be a really just a mid-major you won't want to play. 25-3 this season, undefeated at home, 21-0. That's really, really good. They are a little where they get shaky, of course, is on the road and stuff. Looking at their most recent games, they swept Sam Houston in a series, beat Evansville in a midweek. Their only series loss so far, I think, this year has come in conference play against Kennesaw State. Regardless, though, this is a team, the run totals are staggering to me: 11, 9, 6, 13, 14 a little bit before that in games they've played. So this is a mid-major Vanderbilt really has to lock in on, and I think take it a little seriously. I find that to be the one where it's like that's the most risk for an upset. So if you're looking for a good game to watch in the SEC tonight, I'd go there. I'd go and watch Vanderbilt take on Western Kentucky.
Yeah, I'm looking at how they've done the midweek, so I'm working backwards. Evansville, Western Kentucky won that one 13-3. Before that, beat a terrible Eastern Kentucky team 14-8. Evansville's not very good this year either, by the way. Southern Illinois, March 11th, 21-2. Tennessee Tech, March the 3rd, 15-4. Eastern Kentucky, last week of February, 11-3. You get the point. They hammer midweek pitching. Now, having said that, Vanderbilt has been one of the better midweek pitching and defensive teams around. They've got some pitching depth that shows up in that spot. So it'll be interesting to see how that one shakes out. I think, let's see where Western Kentucky is in the RPI too. 66, which is, man, that's almost impossible to do with being 26-3.
Yeah. Right.
But I don't think they played, other than Kennesaw State, where they lost 2 or 3, a top 100 RPI team yet. They got Dallas Baptist on the rise. So keep that in mind too. The damage has been done against some bad teams.
Mm-hmm.
But Vanderbilt has trouble when it gets to be a slow pitch softball game too. We saw that this weekend. So who else we got this weekend? I know for this week, Tennessee midweeks are always interesting. The A.J. Russell angle would be interesting. I would presume if Sam's right and they get him, he would be on probably a pretty strict pitch count of a week or two because, or excuse me, an inning or two because, why would you want to risk that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I would think he wouldn't go too far. Really, if you want to get him back for conference play, I wouldn't think it'd be that much of a start either way. They'll throw out their typical midweek guys, that you see for the most part. Get some of the freshmen in, get some reps in. Michael Sharman, I think, is someone that comes to mind. They use him a lot in the midweeks. Probably we'll see him tonight. And yeah, taking on a Tennessee Tech team. Those two teams have a little bit of upset history to them. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam and Chris. I think you remember some Tennessee Tech games where they got Tennessee. So maybe something strange happens there, but they're not anything standout good this year. 19-10, 4-2 in conference play. So just another game to watch. If Sam's right and AJ Russell comes out there, that'll be something to watch just to see how he's progressed and whatnot throughout the week, or actually, this season, how he's progressed throughout the season.
Yeah, they've got, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt Bragga's their coach, who was there a long time. He's the one that oversaw when they went to Oxford and won the super regional. I want to say it was the middle part of last decade, maybe the end. And so then went to Rice, got that job, I think, didn't work out. Now he's back there. Traditionally, they have been a team that can just flat out really, really hit the ball. I'm not sure that's what they've got as much this year, just looking by the box scores. They've been a little bit more pitching heavy. But, yeah, did beat Tennessee in 2022, and Sam says 2023 as well. The 22 was the famed Wood Bats game, where I think maybe they shut them out. So yeah, that's not your, especially when you're Tennessee, right? You are playing all these in-state schools where you're playing against kids that probably wanted to play there. You're kind of upset alert strong, because I'm not sure a lot of these teams got the horses to pull it off. But East Tennessee did last. In other words, what is what I'm trying to say? You got guys, it means a lot to them to win that game, just as it did for East Tennessee a couple weeks ago. So keep an eye on that one. Sam says, show some respect. He's got a degree from Tennessee Tech. All right, there we go. Thank you, Sam. What have we got next? In any other midweeks that are catching your eye here?
So the one, if you want like someone who's not playing a mid-major, look to Oklahoma and Texas Tech and Frisco. The one thing I will say about that, though, Chris, Texas Tech is not good. The fall off of Texas Tech baseball may have to be studied, because that used to be a program that was pretty respectable, right? And they still are. I think they're just having a really bad go at it this season. 8-16, 4-5 in conference play. They started out conference play playing Houston and swept them. And then after that, they had to play TCU and Kansas State, who are really good teams in the Big 12, and just have not, been up to snuff at all. They got swept by Kansas State. And then the weekend before that, lost to TCU 2 games out of 3. Pretty hard way to bounce back is playing Oklahoma, right? So this is really more on Texas Tech than anything. But at the same time, Oklahoma, you're looking to bounce back from a series loss against Alabama. Texas Tech is kind of the way to do it. And I think the unique challenge to this for Skip Johnson and his team is it's at a neutral site game in Frisco. It's not a Tennessee Tech or a Western Kentucky. It's not a mid-major. This is a power conference team, all things considered. So that's another game I'll be watching out for to see how they beat them there. And that's just that's the big matchup between 2 power conference teams that I'm watching as well.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Texas Tech and Tim Tadlock. That was a team that felt like a regional host contender just about every year for a while, if not a national seed contender. I don't know if that's an NIL situation or anything. I'm just throwing stuff out against the wall. We don't follow the Big 12 as much, but watching their drop off has been interesting because like clockwork for so long, he had them as like a consensus top 10 team. Oklahoma's been okay in the midweeks. I have worried a little bit about their pitching depth. I think it's more in their 2 and 3 positions in the starting spots on the weekends, where Malachi Witherspoon's been giving up a lot of base runners, and Cam Johnson has too. But I think midweek pitching depth, they do have Cade Crossan. I don't know if that's the guy that they'll go with tonight, if they've been going with him regularly or not. He's 3rd on the teams in innings pitched, and I don't think is a weekend guy, so that might be their guy. He's been okay, but not great. Could be a Gavin Jones, Dylan Crooks kind of game at the end. Reed Hensley, another guy in there too. So I think the bullpen depth for Oklahoma, if they find themselves in a dogfight with Texas Tech, that could be something to watch. Here's what I'm looking at is Mississippi State, which is really teetering. We talked about how State had, coming into the year, one of the more advantageous SEC schedules. Got a redemption chance this weekend versus South Carolina. A couple weekends from now, they catch Florida. Florida's still banged up. That could be interesting. And they got Missouri to end the year. But they're sitting here at 1-8 in the league. And, clock is ticking. We're at the halfway point of the season. State is 16-12 overall. One of the issues they've been having too, Alfred, is just losing midweek games. Now, look, they have taken on some really tough customers. They have played Southern Miss, in a rivalry kind of series, split that. Old Dominion, cut above a lot of midweek teams you'll see teams play. They've now won 5 midweeks in a row. So maybe getting some mojo back there in the midweeks with some pitching depth. But State's working against what's been banked already. RPI is sitting here this morning at 59. So, look, a winning streak can firmly get them in the RPI territory where you can host. But they can't afford a lot of missteps from here on out. So I'm circling that one just for reasons of that.
Yeah, and the good news for Mississippi State tonight, although they do have to travel to Memphis, Memphis has been on a really bad losing streak, really, really bad. They haven't won a game since back on, what is this, March 19th against
Ooh.
Lipscomb was when they lost, and they've lost every game since then. They've started their conference play against East Carolina, always a really good team with Godwin. They got swept there, had to play Ole Miss already in a midweek, and also got swept by the Charlotte 49ers, who actually have not been bad for a mid-major this season. But that all that being said, Mississippi State, I know it's, in Memphis, but this is a really good opportunity to get right, especially after, the tough stretch of games that you had. You kind of had a get right series last weekend, although that was against, LSU. So it was kind of like a loss, to do that. But at the same time, tonight's the night before you welcome in a South Carolina team that, quite frankly, can beat you, with the way you're playing.
Yeah.
So this is a very winnable game for Mississippi State tonight, but an important one nonetheless. Do not go into Memphis, sleepwalking. Be alert and focused and ready to play.
Here's one. Auburn and UAB get the rematch. UAB won the first one. Respectable American athletic program. Auburn has had some pitching trouble lately in midweeks. Gave up 9 to Alabama State 2 Tuesdays ago in a win. Lost 13-5 to South Alabama last time out. Got the pitching tested in Athens this weekend, as Georgia can do to anybody. So watch that one. Auburn a little teetering. I mean, teetering is the strong way to put it. A little vulnerable with the way the midweek pitching is gone and coming off what they came against. But Auburn sitting here in position to host a regional, 12 RPI, 20-8 overall. So, again, this is one of these that at the end of the season, if you're borderline, might want to notch this one today. And I think this one is, okay, it is at Auburn. I thought it was neutral site, but it's not.
Yeah, and the thing, so I'll just go back to their first meeting and see what happened and compare. It was clearly the pitching, right? UAB had 11 hits that game, and that resulted in their 6 runs that they scored. Auburn that game went with Alvarez, who also struggled this weekend against Georgia, although that a lot of pitchers do that, but that is who started that game. He went 3 1/3, gave up the 4 earned runs that ultimately set him down. They also went Carson Myers that same game, and Carson Myers was crazy this weekend. So I'm wondering if they go back to him for a little bit, at least again, even though he already pitched. That could be somewhere they go. Jet Johnston also pitched, which is always funny seeing that, but he also pitched in that game as well. So we'll have to see how that works out for Auburn. Again, that is obviously, a circled game they've had. I'm sure they have revenge on their mind, which gives me confidence in them winning. Guys who stood out in that last game too: Chase Fralick with 2 hits, Cooper McMurray 2 hits in that game. Eric Snow and McMurray both hit home runs that game. And yeah, I mean, you look at they just let UAB have their way with them. I mean, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 players that game UAB did with multiple hits. So Auburn just go into that game with better pitching, and I'm sure you want that after what happened at Georgia. So I'm confident in Auburn, though, Chris. I think they want revenge against this team, and they kind of want to be like, hey, this is our state a little bit. Let us step aside, let us through.
All right, I'm going to ask you to come up with a couple more to watch. I've got one on my radar. I'll just tease it. That's Incarnate Word in Texas A&M for the same reason we went over state. But while you're getting a couple of those together, I'll run through some comments. Caleb, I think he's our resident LSU guy, or one of them, would like to see Schmidt get some work against Louisiana Tech, build up some confidence after a tough start. William Schmidt was a kid. LSU fans know this, of course, but was a very, very highly regarded, could have gone top half of the first round guy last year, who, like a lot of freshmen, struggling a little bit with the free passes, but got first round kind of stuff. We've talked about LSU. I think their pitching is really intriguing. After their top 4 or 5 guys who've been lights out, some of their talented guys have really struggled a little bit. I think Schmidt, I think he's dead on here. You probably want to see Schmidt get in some good starts and maybe start to figure some stuff out, because I think he's an arm who could really help them somewhere down the line in a regional, super regional Omaha. Of note, Mississippi State, LSU has not lost a midweek game yet. And it's just been crushing mediocre pitching pretty much every time out in this spot. So, yeah, the Schmidt thing could be a storyline there. Don't know who they're starting. Let's see. Tech needs to give Matt Braga. Sam is really on the Matt Braga bandwagon day. Need to give this man more help. You know, in all seriousness, that guy has run a very competent baseball program with an identity.
Yeah.
So let's give him that. Expo shortstop. Is this Orlando Cabrera? Doesn't look like him. Saw A.J. Russell pitch that inning a month ago, looked effortless. Parents and agents stepped in, put the kibosh on throwing till mid-April. So there you go. That might be the story. Probably, I'm going to guess Russell's not a first-rounder at this point, just with missing so much time. But, I mean, you say that. All a guy's got to do is show up for a couple of weeks. And, I mean, look, it's not the same thing. Remember what Cade Horton did for Oklahoma? You know, didn't pitch much all year.
Yeah.
You flash a few spectacular weeks, and that might be enough to sneak into the first round for the right team, you know, in a slotting situation. But anyway, so that's interesting info. Russell, in my opinion, probably most talented arm on their staff.
I would say so. With Liam Doyle closely behind. But, I mean, you can't deny what A.J. Russell is. And so that's why I give it to him.
Pick your poise. But, yeah, I think if I'm like, you give me all their staff and get them healthy, who do you not want to see the most? A.J. Russell will probably be my guy.
Right.
Expo says he likes Braga. Cheers for him. Sam stepping in and helping out with Tennessee Tech's NIL. He's donated millions. Got a 25-year-old coming next year.
All the basketball, everything's rolling.
Sam doing his part. Talking about Vandy with 23 home runs this year. Yeah, Vanderbilt really struggled to match power for power. We kind of circled at Arkansas series, said keep an eye on that. Vanderbilt's pitching have been really good and still is really good, but they struggled in that type of series. I just don't think the last few years they have matched up very well on that stage. And I think they got some more power potential in the lineup. I could see R.J. Austin hitting some more. I don't know what's going on with Braden Holcomb right now.
Yeah.
He's there. I mean, he looks like he could hit 30 just by staring at the baseball, but it hasn't clicked for him yet. So, yeah, that's been a big topic. I think that's most of it. Sam's got a lot of health opinions, but I think we've been through those already.
Right.
Anyway, carry on. What have you got next?
I got two more midweeks for us to watch. Speaking of health in Texas, Texas plays Texas State. For those of you who remember from earlier this season, Texas State is a pretty, I'd say, not good mid-major when you look at their record. 12-15, 4-5, but they did beat Oklahoma State at a neutral site at the beginning of the year in a midweek, and Texas A&M. So Texas fans, don't get all cheery and stuff. This is your first game truly without, or your first kind of series / game truly without Max Belyeu. And you have a midweek against a team that has pulled off some upsets before. So I don't think I'm not picking this one to be an upset. I do think Texas is going to get the win here, but important to keep an eye out on that just because Texas State has come through and upset some teams in the past. So we'll see how that works out. Again, though, Texas State overall just has not been good as a whole this season. Part of that, I think, is because they've struggled once conference play hit them in the face. But regardless, keep an eye out for that one. First game Texas has without Max Belyeu. And then the next one, Chris, it wouldn't be a baseball show without me talking about Florida, would it? So
where's my head been, Alfred? I mean, come on. I can't believe I didn't think about that.
But the over on the minutes talked before that was mentioned hit. So if you hit that bet, congrats to you out there. But regardless, we got to talk about Florida. They do play North Florida tonight. Remember that earlier game this season? It ended in that controversial call having to do with the safety base, right? And it ended up as a Florida win. Yeah. Florida scraped by with that win because of that 7-6. Perhaps that gives North Florida some added motivation as they head to Gainesville to play the Gators tonight. Looking at what they did before that, beat Florida Gulf Coast in a series, got beat badly by Georgia Southern in a midweek. But then before that, swept Queens University of Charlotte in a weekend series as well. So we'll have to see how that one works out. I think that could be a little bit of an upset alert based on how Florida's playing too. Although the Gators, I do think the one thing they switched from last year, Chris, is they've been significantly better midweek wise than they were a year ago. So they have actually been pretty steady there. But looking at North Florida as a whole, though, past just their last few, 17-11 overall, 6-3 in conference play. They're not bad. Not bad for their respective level of college baseball. We'll see how that works out there. Another one to keep an eye out on, though, is North Florida against Florida. Sam said, is Chaz Lanier throwing tonight? I wouldn't think so. Although that's a good reference there from the transfer portal.
Right. If Chaz Lanier pitches for Tennessee, then we might have to do an emergency podcast there. Who does Florida throw tonight? Because weren't they going Billy Barlow in the midweek for a while?
Yeah, they were, and that might have switched. They've also gone by Miller in the midweek. That was because they were stretched health wise. So those would be my top two options. If really with Kevin O'Sullivan, he's kind of just been confident in throwing anyone he wants to practically out there. So I would keep an eye out on those two to be the main two ones, but not for sure. So
they've thrown 18 guys this year. And I think, I remember looking at their stat sheet a few weeks ago. I think they'd thrown about 12 or 13. The point I'm making here is they're starting to really have to get into the lower part of their staff and using guys they don't want to use to piece it together because of the health issues elsewhere.
Right.
So
right. They've gone deep because of the health stuff too. And I mean, I don't like Caden McDonald is the guy they've thrown out there who I don't think necessarily is one of their top options to go to. Even By Miller, I know By Miller was probably going to pitch this year, but he's gotten, I think, a little more than people would have necessarily thought he was going to chew, so far this season. I mean, like I said, he's already made a midweek start technically. So we'll see how it goes. I think ideally they'd go Barlow, but because of, how they are and what's happened recently with them, we don't really know for sure.
Yeah, Texas A&M gets to walk into an ambush awaiting it in Knoxville this weekend. In the meantime, game with Incarnate Word. What have they been doing midweeks in terms of pitching plans?
I think they've kind of done – I'm trying to think. That's a good question, actually. Don't know off the top of my head. I'll go back to their last midweek before Kentucky against Houston Christian. They went – it was Brad Rudis. They went fresh corn for a little, and then Caden McCoy. I'd imagine I think they went fresh corn a little this weekend, although you could see him again just to get him more reps, in general. I think if Rudis has enough in him, they could go with that kind of start again. The problem is with A&M, I don't really know if you change a whole lot to your pitching plan because other than, really this Kentucky weekend, that's been the one good thing your team has had. And so, I'm talking about just, rotationally how you put players in because midweeks, obviously they've been lapsing a lot, but, pitching plan wise, I think they kind of stick with it. So ideally Rudis, but we'll see.
They've won 4 midweeks in a row, although it's against Texas Southern, Prairie View, Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and Houston Christian. Not exactly murderer's row of a schedule there. Fresh corn, good point. They need to get him looking more like he looked at Washington last year. He was going to be probably a top 6 arm on this staff and just hasn't pitched like it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one guy they really need to get going to. And I don't know how much they use Cunningham either, another name to throw out there as well.
No, I'm sorry, Cunningham was the kid from Washington.
Yeah,
he's not been
JUCO. Yeah.
Right. But he was a guy that they were really counting. Cunningham was Washington's closer a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they just haven't thrown him much. So I don't know what that's about.
He did do good.
Yeah.
I was going to say he did go 5 1/3 against their Corpus Christi midweek. So
yeah, okay.
that was a good bright spot he's had this year. If they wanted to do that with him again tonight, that's a pretty good idea if they have him available for that.
Their pitching situation is just kind of weird because Lampkin, Prager, and Patton are eating so many innings on the weekend that there's not as much to go around. You may have to pitch some developmental guys. They may be waiting to put him in spots. I don't know if it's that or a health thing. and not having to on the weekend just because their starters are getting so deep into games.
Right.
Which again, starting pitching has not been their problem on the
No.
weekends, at least until last weekend when it suddenly was. Okay, we've hit a lot of these. Anything else? Any other games here that catch in your mind? I mean, anytime Georgia plays, don't park your car in the outfield in Athens.
Right.
So that's always just a sheer curiosity, like how many home runs is Georgia going to hit today? I feel like Queens has been a staple on a few SEC schedules, like certainly Tennessee's. They've not played Georgia yet, so that'll be the first one.
Just, I guess I'll name some of the other games we didn't mention as much. We briefly mentioned Louisiana Tech and LSU. That's at 7:30. Presbyterian South Carolina would be a big get back weekend for Paul Manier and his staff and his team, really. That one at 7 p.m. Arkansas Pine Bluff plays Missouri at 7 p.m. Samford, Alabama. Samford, I don't know how they've been this year, but that's, another tough in-state. These Alabama in-state midweeks have been kind of interesting to watch this year. So keep an eye out for that one as well. That one in Tuscaloosa is at 7 p.m. Going back up, Jackson State, Ole Miss. Jackson State has not been that good, flat out. So that one should be a pretty cakewalk, pretty much a cakewalk for Ole Miss. That one at 5 p.m. And then, Queens and Georgia. That's the earliest game at 3 p.m. So, those are really all the games. I think we went through, obviously, the others. A little bit excited for these because, obviously with Texas, first look without Max Belyeu. Tennessee Tech have that history. You never know. And Tennessee already lost that East Tennessee State midweek matchup. So you'll just never know how that goes. You have a lot of teams looking to get their get back. Vanderbilt against Western Kentucky. South Carolina's in there going up against Presbyterian. Florida against North Florida. That was a good matchup last time they played. A lot of interesting ones when you dive into it like we did. So big stuff there. And if you are just now joining us or anything like that, we talked about Max Belyeu at the beginning. So go back to the beginning and watch that if you want to hear our thoughts on that situation.
We touched briefly on LSU Louisiana Tech, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. You were talking Will Schmidt.
Yeah. That's right. And that's a respectable program,
right.
Louisiana Tech. Of course, an in-state game. I think I'm trying to figure out who the odd, because there's 15 games today. I guess Kentucky. Is that the odd one out?
Yeah, I think so, because
Kentucky... wait a minute. I thought I originally had them playing Xavier today.
No, they're not on the schedule on the press release. Yeah. Okay. So they are the odd one out. And Arkansas, did I mention Arkansas either? No. Arkansas.
Oh, I'm sorry. Xavier was last week. Yeah, you're right. They are off because they've got a Thursday through Saturday series in Lexington against Ole Miss. So there you go. Okay, I was a week off on reading my schedule.
Arkansas plays, I read this wrong because they have Grambling as the home team. Arkansas plays Grambling at Little Rock tonight. That's another one to watch.
Okay. Yeah. Any parting thoughts here, Alfred?
No, I hope once again, we've said it already, but I'll say it again just because we need to get it out there. I hope Max Belyeu gets better. Just don't take Sam Smith's doctor advice.
Don't take Sam's advice on a lot of things.
Right. Yeah. But
we love you, Sam, but we're not taking your advice.
Yes. But other than that, some exciting midweeks tonight. Looking forward to it. And then I guess if we don't meet about these, we'll get into them a little bit for predictions for this weekend.
Yeah, I think we'll probably do a midweek recap tomorrow.
Okay.
As basketball's calming down, we'll be in touch on that. So anyway, yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments, your questions, all that stuff. Your sarcasm, whatever you threw our way today. We're just glad you were here. For Alfred Ezman, I'm Chris Lee. You've been watching Southeastern 16's baseball content. God bless you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.